Welcome to the Global Investor Podcast, a show that focuses on helping foreign investors enter the lucrative U.S. real estate market. Host Charles Carillo combines decades of real estate investing experience with a professional background in international banking to interview experts in all areas of U.S. real estate investing. Now, here's your host, Charles Carillo.
Welcome to another episode of the Global Investors Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Carillo. Today we have Andrew Cushman. He's a former chemical engineer who in 2007 left his corporate position to start flipping single-family properties in Southern California. He then transitioned to multifamily acquisitions and has successfully syndicated and repositioned over 2,100 multifamily units. So thank you so much for being on the show, Andrew.
Good to be here, Charles. Appreciate it.
So you have a very interesting story. Can you give us a little background on yourself, both personally and professionally, prior to getting involved in real estate investing?
When I was in high school, I knew I wanted to do my own thing because ever since I was 5 years old, I used to rake leaves for neighbors and shovel snow and do all that kind of stuff. Probably wasn't all that good at it at 5, but I did it and still got paid. So that's all that mattered, right? They were happy. I was happy. I knew I wanted to do my own thing. I had no idea how to be an entrepreneur. So I figured, hey, I'll get a chemical engineering degree. At least I'll have a good job until I figure out what I'm really going to do. Got the chemical engineering degree, went and worked for a great food company for 7.5 years, got married along the way. And my wife had the same idea that I did. And so we just kept looking for different opportunities. We made popcorn and, we can sell flavored popcorn and, vending and all this stuff. And we figured out, okay, every one of these things makes a little bit of money, but it's really just another job. And I think it was in late 2006, I happened to be walking through the break room at work, saw a Wall Street Journal article about flipping houses. I said, oh, that's interesting. Picked that up, read it, went and researched it. Learned a lot about it, and my wife said, "Okay, this is it. We're going to try this." To do that business, it required reaching out to people who were in pre-foreclosure, meaning they were behind on their payments. The bank was going to take the house, but they haven't taken it yet, and saying, "Hey, let's see if we can help you." And then at the end, if they couldn't keep the house, hopefully they'd want to sell it to us. And so that involved reaching out to those people. So being an engineer and not real good on the phone, it took me 4,576 cold calls.
Wow.
To get our first deal, working probably 90 hours a week, my regular job and that one, but we got it. And when we got that deal and then we flipped it, we made as much as I made all year at my job. So I said, all right, I don't know what better sign than that. So I walked in, quit my job, went full-time into flipping. My wife did the same thing 2 years later. After about 4 really good years of that business, we said, this is great, but it's also kind of like a job. It's not quite as bad, but it's similar. And they said, what will build long-term wealth? What will build passive income? And we just came out of a recession. So we're going into an expansion. All these people who lost their houses can't buy another one, so they're going to rent. What's going to do well in those circumstances? We're like, well, apartments should do well. So we went and found a mentor to learn the business from. Did our first syndication was 2011. It was 92 units, mostly vacant on the other side of the country. And then, like you said, I've done 2,100 units since. It's been a great business. Love doing it, and lots of benefits.
So that's interesting. Yeah. So you're getting out of the transactional and you're getting more into the wealth generation, which is an awesome place to be. I want to kind of dig into this first deal because it's very interesting for me. Number one is that a first multifamily syndication deal. So you picked going into a deal that was 75% vacant, if I'm correct, on 92 units in Georgia. Was it Macon, Georgia? Is that correct?
Yep, you're right on.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about how you found this deal and why did you choose such a heavy renovation?
Well, first of all, anyone listening, don't do what I did. The reason I chose it was because I was naive. And the reason I got the deal is because the broker spotted a sucker from a mile away. This was back in 2011. There was lots of distress. Buyers were far and few between. You could basically, pick any property you want, make an offer, and there's a good chance you're going to get it. And, what we did is we knew we liked the Southeast. And so we just started with Atlanta and then literally followed the freeways out. And there was a particular broker in Macon who seemed to have I think he had like 80% of the listings. We saw that one, called him on it, ended up working out a deal. And we said, okay, there's the purchase price was like $700,000 for 92 units, which kind of tells you something, right? And then with the rehab and everything, the total capital raise was 1.2 million. So that's how we did it. We
Wow.
just said, hey, we like what's going on in the Southeast as far as population and business trends go. That's an area we want to invest in long term. So let's go out there. And then we found this property. And again, I would never recommend someone go buy a C minus hard, very high, heavy deferred maintenance, mostly vacant property on your first deal. But that's what we did. So.
And so, how do you know I imagine you raised all the money for this, or did you get some kind of loan with it? I mean, I imagine there's definitely no typical loan for a hard money loan.
Yeah, I mean, today you could probably get a bridge loan for
Yeah.
55% or something like that, but back then there was
Yeah.
no lending on that kind of thing. So what we did is we syndicated it, and basically it was a cash syndication, saying, okay, we need a total of $1.2 million. Here's our pro forma, and we're going to go out to investors to raise that entire $1.2 million. That was, we coming from the flipping world, we knew some investors because that's how we funded our flips. But we underestimated how difficult it would be to raise $1.2 million back in 2011 with, again, a very different market and our limited network. And we almost didn't get it done. It took us 6 months. We had to delay closing multiple times. And at the end, how we did it is we actually got the seller to carry a note for, it was either $200,000 or $300,000. And that's how we completed the raise, was actually getting the seller himself to finish it so we could close.
Wow. When he did that, how many years did he do that for you? Like,
You know what? I don't remember. It was either 3 or 5 years,
okay.
and we did successfully turn the property around. When we bought it, he was collecting $8,000 a month, again on 92 units. And then when we eventually got it up to collecting about $40,000 a month, and so we refinanced it into agency Fannie Mae loan, paid him off. Investors got all their money back, and so eventually it turned out great, but it was a rough learning experience.
So let's talk about how you, like with this property, how did you estimate the rehab? Like when you're doing it, did you bring a lot of GCs in? Were you using your own knowledge from single family? And then also, managing a project 3 time zones away because you're in California.
Yeah, we estimated it poorly. Is the succinct answer to the question. What we did is we did bring some contractors in for certain aspects of it, and the remaining aspects we made the classic beginner's mistake of kind of leaning on what you hear, especially if you go to boot camps and stuff. You hear these rules of thumb, right? Don't ever use a rule of thumb. So we'd go into units and be like, okay, well, yeah, we'll just budget. Yeah, this should be $5,000 for this unit. And then okay. And we could classify, we said easy turn, medium turn, hard turn. And we said 5,000 for this. Well, the problem was with a property built in the 60s and 70s that's been neglected for 15 years is every time you touch something, it's like peeling back the layers of a rotten onion. You find out, okay, I need to fix this layer, and you go to do that, and you realize there's 4 things wrong beneath that. And so the renovation ended up being way more than we anticipated. So we went over on that. How we managed it is we partnered with a management company, a third party, and then we actually hired a renovation coordinator, a guy who used to have his own general contracting business, and we hired him on salary to go live on site and run the renovation. So that was a critical piece of being able to do that kind of lift from the other side of the country. Now nowadays, kind of as you referenced, when we're buying a property, before we close, we have contractor bids on everything. So we know, to the T what the budget should be. And of course, we factor in a, contingency and all that kind of stuff, but there's no rules of thumbs. There's no guesstimating. We have bids on absolutely everything beforehand. But on that first one, it was a mix of, well, we think it'll be this, and we got a few bids. And with that much neglect of a property, there was a lot more there than we had estimated, and we had vandalism along the way that added to it. So
even with the guy living on site.
Yeah, because it was 92 units, so it's a decent sized property. So he's living on one end, and then, for example, one night someone broke into a vacant fourplex, so one of the buildings that only had 4 units, and they ripped out all the copper out of the walls and didn't bother to even turn the water off. So not only did they rip the copper out, but they flooded the units, right? So that was like $50,000 worth of vandalism. On the property. So again, a lot of lessons learned, and we have all kinds of procedures and things in place now to prevent all of that. We learned our lessons, but Yeah, so that's how that happened.
Other than, other than the high vacancy and a miscalculation on the estimating for the rehab, were there any other huge mistakes that you made, maybe with the property, like choosing it or anything else like this that?
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, it was, it's very common if when you talk to a lot of owner operators, syndicators, anyone in business, it's extremely common for us to start off and see assets and then kind of move up the chain, right? And we ended up doing the same thing because one of the mistakes, hey, this is cheap, we can afford it, right? Well, it's cheap for a reason. And so one of the I would say the mistake is we bought a low income property in a low income area, and that is something we would never even think about that kind of asset now, right? So today we screen for population growth, median income, crime rates. We look at what the neighbors are. Is it in a flood zone? There's all kinds of parameters that every property has to pass before we'll even look at it. So that was one mistake. We bought a C minus property in a C area, and even more important is there'll be some people listening. Oh, I've done great on those kind of properties. Well, we have too, but the area was not only C, it was declining.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So you're not going to get cap rate compression. You're not going to get population growth. You're not going to get income growth that will 10x your returns on the property. And again, fortunately we did buy at the right point in the cycle. We did buy at the right price. And so, it still ended up to be a very profitable deal, but we made a ton of other mistakes as far as outvaluating costs and submarket and all those kind of things.
Yeah. Interesting. So what is your current criteria now? You're sticking more to, what is your strategy and criteria now? Is it B class?
Yeah, we're B class, or if we'll look at a C plus if we can bring it up to a B, and if it's in a B neighborhood. So generally, we're looking at 1980 to 2010 construction in B to A markets, and we buy in markets where there's strong population growth, strong incomes, and so to put numbers on that. We will only buy a property if the median income in that neighborhood, not a 3-mile radius, which is what you see in a lot of OMs, because that's deceiving. A 3-mile radius, that's 6 miles apart, right? So you can get a neighborhood way over here that the median incomes are 150 grand, but your property is in an area where the median income is 15 grand. And the numbers will, the statistics lie, right? So we actually pay for data from ESRI, ESRI, so we can get median income at the neighborhood level. And we won't look at anything if the median income is below 35,000. We really prefer it to be over 40 and ideally over 50. The reason for that is affordability. Affordable housing is generally defined as someone can spend 25% or less of their gross income on rent. So if your rent is $835 a month, that's $10,000 a year. So in order for that to be affordable and someone only has to pay 25%, that means that the median income needs to be 40,000, right? So that's how that. So if you're investing in California or the Mid-Atlantic, those numbers would change for you. But for us in the Southeast, that 35 to 40,000 cutoff works. So that's absolutely critical. Again, we don't buy in flood zones. We look for areas where ideally population growth is above the national average, but the requirement, it has to be at least flat or with the national average. It can't be declining because over time you're going to lose pricing strength with your rents. And we can't be a high crime area. We won't buy in an area that has high crime. And we also look at the neighbors. We won't buy something next to a traditional mall because those are dying, right? We've seen malls. We've seen a handful of malls in Georgia go completely dark, go out of business, right? Which kills the local economy. Now, the one exception would be is sometimes you can find a mall where there's already planned where they're going to come in and redevelop it into something completely different. That's a positive. So we won't buy next to a mall. We won't buy something if there's like a laundromat and kind of rundown commercial. And then, but those are some of the main factors. We've actually, like I said, we've got a whole procedure that they run through, but those are the critical ones.
Yeah, it's so important because it's funny when you talk about the income, because unless you're driving the area, you can see, oh, wow, income on these properties really change. But when you're looking at it on a map, you might say, wow, income is really different between this. And it could be train tracks, it could be a highway. And
Mhm.
I mean, that's 30, 40 feet, right? You know what I mean? I mean, it's nothing, and you're like, wow, that's really changed. One side of the street's better than the other. And so it's so important to know your neighborhood and see that there's some sort of wave of gentrification coming through it. Because without that, I mean, you're just going to be, like you said, buying in a declining area. And then there's no cap rate compression. So at that point, there goes your returns. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So what do you, when you talked about screening your neighborhoods and stuff like that, what is your role in the process? Are you finding deals? Are you underwriting? Are you raising money?
For many years, I was every role.
Mhm.
We did bring on an admin person pretty early on, and that was a blessing. And she's still with us, and now she's way above admin. She's knows and can do anything. Um, these days, we've brought on a couple more people. One is focused on acquisitions, and he actually lives out in Atlanta. And so my role now is really is primarily relationships. Relationships with the investors. So, like, whenever we bring on a new investor, we actually that person and myself, have a one-on-one phone call as well as some other steps. And when people are investing in the deal, the deal, and this goes for any sponsor that anyone is investing with, it the success of it is more on the person running the show than the deal itself. I mean, a great deal is
Yeah.
is obviously
Hmm.
what you want that, but a good sponsor can take a bad deal and turn it into a good one, but a bad sponsor can take an amazing deal and run it into the ground. And I've seen both happen, right? So my main role is those relationships on the investor side. And then also, I have a lot of long-standing relationships with brokers that are bringing us the deals, and then the relationships with our property management company. And I also go out of our way, and this gets into asset management, which is a critical piece of multifamily. Is I have good, very active relationships with our on-site staff at the property. So the maintenance manager knows how to. He can call my cell if he wants, right? If he got to, not for, hey, what do I do about the air conditioner on unit 3C, but like if he's having an issue, like, hey, you know what, the regional managers, I don't feel like I'm being listened to. I need these tools and I can't get them. Stuff that they don't call for day stuff, but important stuff. And really, it's more, they know that there's an open chain of communication, and they have the vision of where we're trying to get the property and what their role is in that. And so my role is to provide that vision, to provide them with a venue. I tell them all the time, my role is to enable you to be able to do your job as effectively and easily as possible,
Mm.
right? So what tools do you need? Do you have any ideas on how to improve things and all of that? And then, of course, I no longer do the initial underwriting of deals, because that was a bottleneck. So now we have a couple people that do that. And then if we're going to put in an offer, then that's when I get involved. And then certainly if we're actually uh, believe we're getting an offer accepted or we're going to go under contract, then I go back through every single detail. So I'm kind of at the high level deal approval now.
Nice. So you're working on relationships, you're sourcing money, sourcing deals. That's one very interesting what you said about having contact directly with the maintenance men. We do something similar there, with our attorneys and stuff, even eviction attorneys. I've had
Hmm.
attorneys call you and be like, "Hey, we can't reach the manager. I'm in eviction court right now. What are we doing here?" You know what I mean? And so it's great to have that contact for those one-off calls, not like you said. One thing I said when I was researching for this episode is you said about how you vet passive investors and how it's kind of been an issue in the past. And this is very interesting because it's not something that many people talk about, or I don't. How do you vet your passive investors, and how does that process work where you can bring them in, they're into your network, and how do you know that how do you know that they're going to work out for a deal that you've got going?
It really comes down to clear communication and understanding what each person's expectations are.
Mm.
And so where that comes from is going back to that very first deal. I mentioned that we needed $1.2 million.
Mm.
Well, from the get-go, I had two investors that each said, hey, I'm in for 400. I'm like, man, this is awesome. I already got 800 raised and I haven't even started, right? Well, one of those investors, who actually was a pretty good friend, Turned out he didn't even have the money, and he ended up filing bankruptcy a couple of years later, right?
Oh.
So I didn't do a good enough job of verifying that he actually had the funds available. The second one, he had the funds, but turns out I didn't ask enough good questions to find out he wanted to be general partner on the deal. And his 400 came with that attached. And I was like, wait a second, we barely know each other. Like, being a partner in one of these things is like a 5 to 10 year marriage, and you don't, it's easy to get into, hard and messy to get out of. And I already could tell, like, him and I would probably want to see things differently. So even though it was scary, I said, sorry, can't take your 400, right? So those are two examples of, I didn't find that out early enough. I found it out later, and of course it caused me a lot more difficulty, and eventually obviously did raise it, but it caused a whole lot more stress. But so now, if you're saying, okay, I want to take other people's money in and provide them with an opportunity and syndicate, number one, and this is what we do is we have them first thing we do is have them fill out a questionnaire. It just kind of says, hey, are you accredited? Are you sophisticated? How much money do you, if you like a deal, how much money do you think you want to invest? What's your timeline for, are you want to invest now? Are you looking to invest in 6 months? Are you okay with a 5-year hold? Right? You don't want to accept funds from somebody who needs their money back in 12 months if you're doing a 5-year deal. Right. So you want to make sure that those expectations line up. If you're talking to somebody, and another question we ask is, usually during the interview is, hey, if you were to invest in a syndication, what kind of returns are you looking to get? Right. If someone says, I want a 25% IRR, you know what? 5 years ago, we could do that. I wouldn't I don't feel right promising that in today's market. So we're probably not a good fit for you, right? So so when it comes to vetting investors, that's really what it comes down to, is making sure their expectations and financial goals line up properly with whatever opportunity that you are providing them. And if not, just say, hey, you know what? It was great meeting you. We appreciate it, but we're probably not the best fit. And that's really the way to do it. Now, as far as like, deeply vetting them, like finding out the guy was actually on the verge of bankruptcy instead of having 400 grand, we don't do that anymore. And the key mistake I made on that first one is I was basically relying on 2 people for 80% of the capital stack. Don't do that unless you've got someone that is absolutely reliable and vetted and will show up with it, right? So now, if I talk to somebody and they're like, oh, we're going to invest 50 grand, and turns out they file bankruptcy, no big deal, because I'm not relying on that 50 grand. So as long as you do that, where you're not relying on a particular person, then you should be good. And then also, especially in the beginning, always raise way more capital than you think you need in terms of soft commitments, right? So if you need to raise $1 million to do your first syndication, get soft commitments. Basically someone says, yeah, I'll invest for 2 million. Yeah. Because when it actually comes time to write that check, some people just get cold feet. Some people say, shoot, I forgot. I'm buying a condo for grandma, whatever. It's just that first time around, it tends not to show up, at 100%. So.
Yeah, you're definitely going to have 50%, especially in your first syndications. It's typical for 50% to kick out, as I've seen before. And it's like you said, I've had everything, like people buying RVs, people doing this, people that, all this kind of stuff with their money, or they've already invested it. And,
that too.
That's in like, oh, listen, come back to me in 5 years. Okay. Or something like this. So that doesn't doesn't really help me now, but thank you for being honest with me. So tell me some of the best ways you guys have found. Obviously right now, over 2,000 units done, it's not really an issue for raising money, but I guess when you're starting out, or maybe what you're continuing now, what are some of the best ways you found of sourcing capital from investors?
It's changed since we started the business. When I started, it was basically strictly, in person, one-on-one networking. We definitely started, as most people do, friends and family. People that literally, my mom was our first ever check, right? And on that syndication, and then again, people that we had met in the flipping business. Now today, all of that still applies, but the new syndicator has a lot more other venues, right? You can go on places like Bigger Pockets and just get on the forums and just start getting involved in conversations and answering questions and asking questions and connecting with people and letting people know what you're doing. And people will reach out to you and be like, "Hey, well, when you do your next deal, let me know," right? And you say, "Okay, cool. Hey, let me let's get on the phone for a few minutes, and then I'll get you in the system." So do that. So there, it's. I mean, I know people who raise millions of dollars on Instagram, right?
Mm.
I've never made an Instagram post in my life, but nowadays, if you're good on Instagram, you can raise millions of dollars for real estate. So those are the way, and candidly, we're looking at transitioning a little bit and say, well, okay, well, how do we in a professional way, use those platforms as well. But yeah, that is really friends and family, immediate network, and then build a following, however small. You don't need that many raving fans or partners to get started. And then the second thing is partners, right? Maybe you're a really good deal finder, a really good underwriter. Partner with somebody who already has the network and can raise the capital. That's what we did for deal number 2, 3, and 4. Is the guy that taught me the business. After closing the first deal, I went to him and said, "Hey, we barely made that raise, but we love the business and we learned a lot. Would you partner with us?" And he's like, "We could actually get along pretty well. Sure, we'll do that." And so the next 3 deals, we found the deals, and he helped us raise the money. And by the time we got past that, it starts to snowball, and we didn't have to do that anymore. So either you can do it. I would say do it yourself, but then also simultaneously consider who you might be able to partner with that can bring that to the table for you and accelerate your scaling.
Yeah, so find out the places that round out people that round out where you're not the best at, and to finalize the whole deal with the GP.
Mm-hmm.
So, what kind of mistakes do you see real estate investors make?
Well, one is, especially in today's market, I see a lot of investors making overly aggressive assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a sponsor put out a deal the other day where they assumed, in addition to their value add strategy, 4% market rent growth for 5 consecutive years going forward. That's a bit aggressive. Everything has to go absolutely perfect for 5 years in order for that to happen. So too aggressive assumptions. Another one is undercapitalizing deals. And this is something that I've seen over and over again for the last 10 years, where someone says, okay, the purchase price is this. I need 200 grand for renovation, and pay a fee here, pay a fee there. Okay, that's how much capital we need. You also need operating reserves. You need contingencies for case your renovation budget runs over. How much is your deductible on your insurance, right? So I'll give you an example. We have a property in the Florida Panhandle that got destroyed by a hurricane in 2018, and the deductible on that, I think, was almost $400,000, right? So do you have the reserves to cover the deductible, and do you have the reserves to get going on rebuilding that property instead of waiting for 6 months until the insurance carrier cuts you a check? Or we've had properties where managers commit fraud or something like that. So always having sufficient reserves to get the property through any kind of unforeseen circumstances. The reason people don't like to do that is because, of course, when you're underwriting, it drops the return, right? Because you've got cash that's just kind of you're raising and sitting there. But it is far, far harder to get capital after you close on the property than it is to get it up front. And it certainly would, we've never done a capital call. But if you have to go to your investors 2.5 years down the road and be like, "Oops, sorry, we need some more money," that's not going to go over well. So always bring as much capital as you can to the table up front.
Okay, awesome. So what do you think are the main factors that have contributed to your success?
Relentless persistence. I don't give up easily. Like I said, I made 4,500 phone calls to get our first flip. We just closed a large portfolio in March. We looked at 347 apartment complexes to find that one that we truly felt was a great deal and was worth was a worthwhile opportunity. So patience and relentless persistence, and not compromising on things we shouldn't. And actually that's a bit of we're probably a little too conservative, and everyone these days gets on podcasts and says they're conservative, and actually kind of drives me nuts because half of them aren't. But the flip side of that is the reason I say I think we're too conservative is we probably should have bought a lot more deals over the last few years. There's probably deals we passed on that actually would have been great. So it's a tough thing to balance out, right? Because you're guessing about the future, and your goal is to under promise and over deliver. But if you do that too much, you're never going to buy anything, right?
Right.
So that's another thing that I would add to that.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Andrew. How can our listeners learn more about you and your business?
Probably the easiest way, like I said, I'm still gearing up to social media. I'm semi old school here. I'm trying to get up to the modern age, but probably the easiest way is just our website, Vantage Point Acquisitions, vpacq.com. If you Google Vantage Point Acquisitions, that'll come up. It's usually the top search result. And there's a number of tabs on there for learning about investing or mastermind. We have a mastermind for people who've actually started investing and have taken action and gotten into the game and want to scale faster. But also, if you just want to reach out and connect, there's a contact us tab on there, and of course LinkedIn and Bigger Pockets and all those as well. So
awesome. Yeah. So our listeners can reach out to you and your team and learn more. And thank you so much for coming on today, and looking forward to connecting with you in the near future.
Yeah, sounds good. I appreciate it, Charles. Take care.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hi guys, it's Charles from the Global Investors Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're interested in getting involved with real estate, but you don't know where to begin, set up a free 30-minute strategy call with me at schedulecharles.com. That's schedulecharles.com. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Global Investor Podcast. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe on iTunes or Google Play to get new weekly episodes. For more resources and to receive our newsletter, please visit globalinvestorpodcast.com. And don't forget to join us next week for another episode.
Nothing in this episode should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Any investment opportunities mentioned on this podcast are limited to accredited investors. Any investments will only be made with proper disclosure, subscription documentation, and are subject to all applicable laws. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Syndication Superstars, LLC exclusively.